primary objective of Apollo Soyuz was to demonstrate that the two great space powers.
You might think you know the Soviet milestones, the missions, the astronauts.
I don't think that the next major milestone will be my flight to the moon, if only because I mustn't be a monopolist.
But beneath the surface lies a web of secrets the world was never meant to see. The USSR was desperate to win the space race, no matter the cost or the casualties. These are 20 chilling secrets the Soviet space program never wanted you to uncover.
Man's first attempt to demonstrate the ability to go to the moon, to land there, and to return to Earth.
Number 19. Leica The Space Dog. Alright, let's not sugarcoat it. This story doesn't have a happy ending, and no number of flags or medals can change that. Whenever humans want to test something dangerous, we rarely start with ourselves. We start small. Lab rats, mice, guinea pigs. They take the hit so we don't have to. But when it came to space travel in the 1950s, that wasn't enough. The Soviet Union needed something closer to humans for their first real shot at orbit. It was 1957. The space race was heating up, and the Soviets were leading. But launching a person? Way too risky. So instead, they picked up a stray dog from the streets of Moscow. Her name was Leica. They operated on her, added sensors to track her vitals, and then locked her inside a tiny capsule with no way back. That capsule, Sputnik 2, launched, and Leica died within minutes from stress and heat.
With Leica surviving just a few hours and travelling around the world 9 times before a failure in the Soviet spacecraft meant she overheated and died.
The USSR called her a hero and claimed they got important data. But decades later, after the Soviet Union collapsed, a top scientist admitted the truth. They learned nothing. Leica didn't choose to be part of history. She was used, abandoned, and erased by the silence of space. Number 18. Ghost Cosmonauts. Alright, buckle up, because this one's wild. It's part sci-fi, part conspiracy, and all mystery. We're talking about the lost cosmonauts, a theory that suggests more people went to space than we were ever told, and some never came back. The basic idea is that the Soviet Union was desperate to beat the United States. The space race may have sent people into space before Yuri Gagarin's official 1961 flight. But when those missions failed, crashed landings, lost signals, and even deaths, they were erased from history.
But is any of this true? Did the Soviets actually cover up the deaths of its cosmonauts, or are these accusations nothing more than a 60-year-old cosmic conspiracy theory?
One story claims a cosmonaut crash-landed in China and was captured. Another says a trainee died during a secret launch, and the Soviets just buried the evidence. Then there's the eerie part. Radio recordings picked up by amateur operators. Strange breathing, fading voices, and what sounded like doomed missions. All denied, of course. Now, there's no hard proof. But let's be honest, the Soviet Union wasn't exactly known for playing by the book. So, were there really other people who reached for the stars and vanished? Maybe, maybe not. Number 17. Secret Space Soldiers. Let's pull back the curtain on something most people never saw coming. The Soviet military space program. While rockets were flying to the moon and the world watched cosmonauts wave at cameras, something else was happening quietly behind the scenes. From 1961 to 1981, the USSR wasn't just racing to space for glory. They were running covert missions to get the upper hand in the Cold War. These missions used satellites for spying, communication, navigation, and even early warnings of enemy attacks. Their military program was packed with secret launches and hidden failures, all buried beneath the flashy surface of their scientific missions. If a satellite failed, they'd quietly tuck it into another program so no one would notice. Public failure was a no-go. And why all the secrecy? Simple. The Cold War wasn't just fought with bombs and spies. It was fought in space, too. The USSR knew they had to stay one step ahead of the United States, even if that meant hiding what they were really doing up there. The Kremlin spun the story, kept it clean, and protected its image at all costs. It was a strange time when the truth floated in orbit, but only a few ever saw it. Number 16. Soviet moon launch. Here's a twist in the space race story you might not know. The Soviets, who started way ahead, never made it to the moon.
Man's first attempt to demonstrate the ability to go to the moon, to land there, and to return to Earth.
And not for lack of trying. At first, the USSR was crushing it. Sputnik, the first satellite, theirs. First man and woman in space, also theirs. While the United States stumbled through its early Apollo missions, the Soviets looked untouchable. But then, President Kennedy made a bold promise. America would land a man on the moon. Suddenly, the game changed, and the Soviets had to scramble to keep up. The problem? They weren't ready. Their moon program didn't have the same planning or funding. It was rushed, reactionary, and frankly, a mess. The Americans kept pushing forward. The Soviets, meanwhile, struggled behind the scenes. And just days before Apollo 11 made history, the Soviets launched a test of their N-1 moon rocket. It exploded. On the launch pad. The rocket and the pad were both wiped out. That failure sealed their fate. The USSR quietly backed away from the moon race. They had won the early battles, but lost the ultimate prize. Number 15. Dogfight in orbit. After the Soviet Union crumbled, a chilling secret about Cold War-era space operations was uncovered. The USSR had been involved in a dogfight in space. This covert confrontation, hidden for decades, was revealed in the 1990s and shed new light on the USSR's military ambitions in space. The incident took place in 1967 during the Salyut 1 mission, the first space station launched by the USSR. Salyut 1 wasn't just for scientific research, it had potential military uses too. During the mission, a confrontation broke out between two Soviet spacecraft, one being the Salyut 1 space station, and the other, a military spacecraft designed for testing orbital combat tactics. The situation escalated into what could only be described as a dogfight in space. Unlike the dogfights of fighter jets, this battle involved high-speed maneuvering in the vacuum of space, requiring precise coordination. Reports suggest one spacecraft may have attempted to disable or board the other as part of a covert military operation. The full details were kept under wraps until the fall of the USSR, revealing just how seriously the Soviets were preparing for space-based warfare. Number 14. Soviet Space Cannon. Imagine your favorite sci-fi movie. Ships floating in orbit, laser guns blazing. Now, forget the lasers for a second. What if you could shoot real bullets in space? Turns out you actually can, and the Soviets proved it. Back in the 1970s, the USSR built a space cannon. Not a laser or plasma weapon, but an actual 23mm gun mounted on one of their space stations. The idea? Be ready for any threat, especially if the United States tries something sneaky with satellites or weapons in orbit. They only tested it once, but it worked. The cannon fired in space. Now, here's the twist. Firing a gun in zero gravity isn't exactly smooth. The recoil was so strong, it messed with the space station's position. They had to use extra fuel just to steady the thing afterward. Aiming the gun was also tricky. You had to rotate the whole station just to point it in the right direction. So yeah, the cannon wasn't exactly practical, but it was real, and it became the first ever weapon fired in space. Number 13. Soyuz spacecraft. When a spacecraft earns the nickname Space Workhorse, you know it's done something extraordinary. The Soyuz spacecraft definitely lived up to that title, launching more than 2,000 times over several decades. First developed by the USSR and later used by Russia, Soyuz became the go-to rocket for sending both spacecraft and astronauts into the sky. For about a decade, Soyuz was the only rocket capable of delivering people and cargo to the International Space Station. At its peak, Russia was launching around 6 of these reliable rockets every year for various missions. That's a lot of space trips. Soyuz became a symbol of Russian space exploration, a true testament to the power of consistent engineering and dedication. Even as space programs evolved, the Soyuz continued to play a critical role. Its legacy is still felt today, reminding us that sometimes the most dependable tools leave the biggest mark. Number 12. Russian Space Shuttle. Let's jump to the late 1980s. The Americans had space shuttles soaring, and Russia had its Mir Space Station floating in orbit. But while the Americans could visit Mir with their shuttles, the USSR didn't have one of their own. So what did they do? They copied it, literally. Thanks to the KGB, the Soviets managed to steal American shuttle designs. No, this isn't a movie plot. It really happened. Through a mix of hacking, spying, and a few well-placed bribes, they gathered all the technical details. The US did the hard work, and Russia followed the blueprint. The result was a nearly identical space shuttle named Buran. It flew just once, unmanned, in 1988.
Whoa, here it is. It's huge. Take a look.
And it worked beautifully. But then came the collapse of the USSR. By 1994, the program was shut down. No more launches, no grand future. Still, it was one of the boldest technological heists of the Cold War. Imagine if they'd pulled it off earlier. Space history might have looked very different. Instead, the Buran sits in museums and hangars. Number 11. Testing on animals. After Leica's heartbreaking journey, the Soviets continued to send animals into space, each contributing to the understanding of how living creatures handle the harsh conditions of orbit. One of the most famous pairs was Belka and Strelka, who orbited Earth aboard Sputnik 5 in 1960.
60 years ago, the dogs Belka and Strelka performed an orbital flight.
They made history as the first animals to survive space travel and return safely, marking a significant milestone for human spaceflight. Alongside them was Zvezdochka, another dog on the mission, though she didn't orbit. Still, she played a key role in the experiment. The Soviets also tested monkeys, seen as more biologically similar to humans. Abrek, one of the first, flew into space in 1959, although details of his mission remain scarce. In the early 60s, primates like Tsigan and Donushka helped scientists gather data on the effects of space, including weightlessness and radiation. Turtles, too, ventured into space. In 1968, 4 turtles were sent aboard Zond 5, which circled the moon. Remarkably, all survived the journey, offering crucial insights into long-duration spaceflight. Mice, rats, and other small animals were also frequently used to test how space affected metabolism, growth, and development, contributing vital knowledge that shaped human space exploration. Number 10. Trip to Venus. Let's take a break from Earth and the Moon and talk about something the Soviets did that was truly wild. They aimed for Venus. Yep, back in the early 1960s, while the world was focused on the Moon, the USSR decided to shoot for the second planet from the Sun. They built a series of probes called Venera, and these weren't just test toys, they were serious machines. They didn't just send 1 or 2 either. They launched a whole fleet. 13 probes made it into Venus's atmosphere, and 10 actually landed on the surface. Now, if you know anything about Venus, you know it's like an oven wrapped in poison. The temperatures are crazy high, and the pressure would crush most things. So sure, those probes didn't survive long once they landed. But the fact that they got there at all, back in the 1960s, is pretty mind-blowing. Most countries today wouldn't even try it, yet the USSR did it again and again. It's one of those hidden space race stories people often forget, but it proves one thing. While others chased the moon, the Soviets dared to chase fire. Number 9. OKB-1. When you think of where American astronauts train for their space missions, you'd probably think of NASA facilities. But what about Soviet cosmonauts? If you don't know the answer, you're not alone. For years, the USSR kept its training base under wraps. OKB-1, a remote facility just outside Moscow, was where many of the most famous cosmonauts, including Yuri Gagarin, prepared for their historic space flights. OKB-1 wasn't just about training cosmonauts, it played a key role in the development of Soviet space technology. Initially focused on ballistic missiles, it quickly transitioned to space exploration. OKB-1 was behind the creation of the R-7 Sora, the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile, which laid the groundwork for the Soviet space program. After the death of its founder in 1966, the facility continued its work under different names, contributing to major projects like the Mir Space Station and the Energia launch vehicle, which could carry the Buran space shuttle. Number 8. Mir Space Station. Before the International Space Station became the star of orbit, there was Mir, the longest-lasting space station until 2009. But Mir wasn't just floating aimlessly in space. It was a bustling hub for astronauts conducting scientific experiments. Its mission? To learn what it takes to live in space long-term and tackle the challenges of making space a permanent home. From 1981 to 2001, Mir hosted numerous crews who lived and worked in the harsh conditions of outer space. They dealt with everything from isolation to adjusting to weightlessness. We can't fully grasp this until we experience it. Every experiment was a step closer to understanding how humans could survive and thrive in space for extended periods, paving the way for the ISS to take over. But nothing lasts forever. After 2 decades in orbit, Mir's mission came to an end when funding was cut off. Still, its impact on space exploration remains undeniable. Mir wasn't just a space station, it was a proving ground for everything we know about living beyond Earth. Number 7. Polus Laser Platform. In 1987, the Soviet Union tried to do something straight out of science fiction: launch a space laser. The project was called Polus, a massive spacecraft secretly designed to carry and possibly fire a laser weapon from orbit. Its mission? Test whether laser technology could be used in space to shoot down satellites or missiles. If it had worked, Polus would have been the first space-based weapon of its kind. But there was one big problem: it never made it. Launched atop the powerful Energia rocket, Polus was supposed to reach orbit, flip around in space, and begin its classified mission. Instead, a technical error during that flip maneuver caused the spacecraft to re-enter Earth's atmosphere. It crashed into the Pacific Ocean, ending the mission in just a few minutes. The laser never had a chance to fire a single beam. Number 6. Valentina Terishova. It's quite the irony that during a time when women weren't exactly celebrated in many parts of the world, the USSR decided to send one into space. After sending the first man into space, the Soviet Union focused on women. They screened candidates to find those who could achieve the same feat. They wanted to see if women could manage the tough physical and mental demands of space travel. This was a scientific mystery because of the differences between male and female bodies. From an initial group of 400 candidates, it was narrowed down to 40, then 5, and finally, Valentina Terishova emerged as the chosen one. But why her? Sure, she was an experienced parachutist, but her backstory also played a crucial role. Valentina's history showed her loyalty and devotion. This made her an ideal symbol for the Soviet Union, perfect for promoting its greatness. On 16 June 1963, Valentina became the first woman to fly into space, orbiting the Earth 48 times over 3 days. Her mission was a key moment in space history. It inspired NASA to include women in the astronaut program. This change led to the legendary Sally Ride. Number 5. Zamia Space Mirror. Now imagine a satellite in space bouncing sunlight back to Earth, extending daylight hours, lighting up cities at night, or even brightening dark regions in winter. Sounds wild? That's exactly what Russia tried in the early 1990s with the Zamia Space Mirror project. The idea was simple but bold. Launch a thin, reflective film into space, unfold it like a giant solar sail, and angle it just right to catch the sun's rays. In theory, it would act like an artificial moon, casting sunlight over Earth, and possibly replacing electric lighting in some areas. In 1993, the first test, Zamia 2, sort of worked. The mirror unfolded in orbit and created a moving light beam across Europe, visible like a glowing spot racing through the sky. But the reflection wasn't strong enough to be useful, and the light flickered like a spotlight in fog. A second version, Zamia 2.5, was launched in 1999. This time, the mission failed when the mirror got stuck during deployment and tore apart, ending the project before it could prove anything. Though short-lived, Zamia sparked debates. Was this a clever solution for energy conservation, or a nightmare for nature and stargazers? Critics worried about upsetting the night sky and ecosystems, and even disrupting sleep cycles. In the end, the dream of artificial daylight died with the project, but Zamia left behind a glowing question. Could we ever truly control night and day from space, or should we even try? Number 4. Roarsat, the nuclear gamble. In the high-stakes Cold War space race, The Soviet Union didn't just aim for the stars, they aimed with reactors. The Roarsat program, short for Radar Ocean Reconnaissance Satellite, began in the 1960s and was built on a bold and controversial idea, launching nuclear-powered satellites into orbit to spy on ships at sea. These satellites carried onboard nuclear reactors, providing the constant, high-powered energy that solar panels just couldn't deliver for round-the-clock military surveillance. But here's the twist. Many of these satellites didn't go out with a quiet fizzle. Instead, some fell back to Earth, their radioactive guts crashing down in remote regions. In one infamous case, a Roarsat splashed into Canada's wilderness, sparking global outrage and cleanup costs the USSR had to pay. And it didn't stop there. Soviet scientists pushed further into nuclear tech with nuclear thermal and electric propulsion, futuristic systems meant to carry astronauts to Mars or beyond. While fascinating, these projects were plagued by technical issues and safety fears. No mission using these systems ever made it off the ground. The Topaz 2 reactor, another secretive development, was meant to power military satellites, not peaceful exploration. Its limited use and long-hidden details only deepened suspicions. Number 3. Mind control experiments. The Soviet Union's space program wasn't just about rockets and satellites. Behind its groundbreaking missions were experiments that tested the limits of psychological manipulation. These are often called psychoenergetics or psychotronics. Though details remain classified, reports suggest the USSR explored mind control techniques on cosmonauts, using the extreme conditions of space as a testing ground. One area of interest was psychological warfare. The Soviets focused on how isolation and stress impact the human mind, especially in the emptiness of space. Cosmonauts faced sensory deprivation. They were kept in isolation to see how it affected their thoughts and decisions. The goal? Learn to manage astronauts' mental states under extreme stress. This may involve techniques like hypnosis or behavioral conditioning. The Soviets were reportedly fascinated by whether these methods could enhance a cosmonaut's ability to perform under pressure or even change their behavior. Even more controversial were experiments on telepathy and psychokinesis. Some reports say the Soviets looked into whether cosmonauts could communicate without radios. Number 2. Ambitious Mars plans. USSR might not have succeeded with its early attempts to get data from Mars, but that didn't stop them from dreaming big about the Red Planet. After the United States made its historic moon landing, the Soviet Union wasn't content to sit back. They decided it was time to show their own power in space by planning to inhabit Mars. They even considered Venus as a backup destination, just in case. The Soviet plan wasn't just about reaching Mars, it was about living there. They envisioned sending humans to the planet for a full year to prove their dominance in the space race. But this wasn't some far-off fantasy. They were serious. The USSR started testing their plans, even sending several people and animals on simulated missions to Mars. Sadly, many of these test subjects didn't survive the harsh conditions. In the end, the USSR had to scrap its Mars ambitions, and humanity still hasn't made it to Mars today. But fast forward to the present, and Elon Musk's SpaceX is picking up where the Soviets left off. Musk has made it his life's mission to make Mars colonization a reality, with plans to send humans to the Red Planet in the coming decades. Number 1. The man who launched the Soviet space program. When we think about the astronauts who made history in space, we often forget about the unsung heroes who made those missions possible in the first place. Sergei Korolev was one of those heroes. As the mastermind behind the Soviet space program, he was the force driving Russia's race to the stars. Korolev started his career working on missiles and rockets during World War II, and later became the visionary behind the launch of Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite. Under Korolev's leadership, the Soviet space program achieved historic firsts, including the launch of Sputnik and the landmark mission of sending the first human into space aboard Vostok 1 in 1961. He was also the man behind Luna 9, the Soviet spacecraft that became the first to land on the moon. Korolev's work put the Soviets ahead in the space race, and he set the stage for many of the key moments in space history. Sadly, Korolev's life was cut short by an operation in the late 1960s, and some say the Soviet Union's chances of winning the space race faded with him. His key contributions are still central to space exploration. Without him, the cosmos could have looked quite different. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more interesting stories.